I'm Kashpi Singhal, the Digital Media Specialist of the STEM-E Youth Career Development Program. Welcome to the 10th episode of STEM-E Interviews.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. My name is Noah Greenspan. I am the director and founder of the Pulmonary Wellness Foundation, formerly the Pulmonary Wellness and Rehabilitation Center and the COVID Rehabilitation and Recovery Clinic at H&D Physical Therapy in New York City. I'm a cardiopulmonary physical therapist, and I specialize in heart disease, lung disease, complex medical rehabilitation, and most recently, COVID rehabilitation.
Okay, so let's get started. Can you take us through your background, where you started, and how you got to where you are now?
Yes, I started in Brooklyn, New York as a baby. And I grew up, went to school in Stony Brook, New York. That was my first college. I went to Midwood High School first. I went to Stony Brook. At the time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but my father gave me a newspaper that talked about the career of physical therapy, and it sounded very interesting to me. And so I started making arrangements to start taking some of the classes to become a physical therapist. And I got my bachelor's in physical therapy from the Upstate Medical University in Syracuse, went to work as a 21-year-old really kid, and the rest is history. I've been a physical therapist now for about 30 years. I began specializing in cardiovascular and pulmonary rehabilitation, which is heart and lungs. And in 1998, I left. I was working at NYU Medical Center, and I left the medical center to open my own practice, the Pulmonary Wellness and Rehabilitation Center.
Wow, that's a lot, and that's super interesting too.
Thank you.
How did your education at the State University of New York, Upstate Medical University impact your decision to pursue your career?
So it almost drove me out of it. So here's the thing. So I had this plan. I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Upstate Medical University and I am going to get straight A's, and I'm going to be the valedictorian of my class. And then I'm going to get my dream job at Rusk Institute, which is NYU Medical Center, right? It was one of the most prestigious rehabilitation centers in the city. Now that dream of getting straight A's and becoming valedictorian of my class was squashed the first semester when I got a C- in a 7-credit class. And after having about a 3.5 GPA for my first few years of college, I had a 1.9 GPA. I was the lowest student in my class. I had the lowest GPA. I was kind of like the dunce in the class. And it was actually the best thing that could have happened to me, because really, I'll be honest, I'll make a confession here at STEM-E, but this is really an exclusive confession. Really, I deserved to fail the class. And I remember it was the last day of class, and I called my teacher. I was standing at this place called Varsity Pizza, and it was the last day of class, and I thought it might be my last day in Syracuse because I thought I might have failed out of college the first semester. And I called my teacher, and my hand was shaking on the phone, and I said, "Sue," and she said, "You got a C-." Now, to most people, that would be the worst thing that could happen to them. And I went, "Yes!" And the truth of the matter is I really deserved to fail, but I had a teacher who had faith in me. And long story short, it took a lot of pressure off me because I knew I was never going to be valedictorian. In fact, I was hanging on by the skin of my teeth, but it was like a lifesaver. And the truth of the matter is, even after I graduated with my average grades, and I'm not advising average grades, everybody, that's not what I'm trying to say here, but I still got my dream job at Rusk Institute. So, grades are important for some things, but they're not everything.
That's so reassuring.
Yeah. It doesn't mean don't try. I mean, one of the questions I think you're going to ask me is, what would I do differently? And I did say I didn't read the questions. I glanced at the questions. But, I would have done certain things differently, like especially in high school. Like I would have gone to more classes. I would have done more of the work, done more of the reading. I would have been a more well-rounded individual than I currently am, but it hasn't ultimately hurt me in any way. So I don't have any regrets but anyway, I made it anyway. So
That's really interesting. What is a pulmonary rehab specialist?
So when we talk about physical therapy and rehabilitation, we're really talking about allowing people to get back to their lives after an injury or an illness, right? So pulmonary is related to the respiratory system. So it's really the lungs and the airways in the lungs, and cardio is heart. So the people that I see for pulmonary rehabilitation and pulmonary physical therapy have things like COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or asthma, or pulmonary fibrosis. And these are things that typically either affect the lungs by either making it difficult for you to breathe air in or breathe air out. And so the overwhelming commonality in the patients that I see is that 95% of the patients that I see in one way or another are short of breath. So they come to me and they can't breathe. So they can't walk, they can't breathe, they can't climb stairs. And so what I do is I try to kind of get to the bottom of why aren't they able to breathe? And sometimes it's a physical issue, sometimes it's a physiologic issue, sometimes it's a behavioral issue, like somebody has stopped exercising or something like that. And sometimes it's an emotional issue. So my goal is to always get to the root of the problem and then try to help kind of untwist those threads little by little by little to help people breathe better and get their lives back.
Oh, that sounds like a really important job.
It's been a real gift for me. It's been a real gift and a privilege and an honor to be able to participate in people's lives in a way that is really meaningful. And, there's a saying that says, if you can't breathe, nothing else matters. And it's really true. The first thing that we do when we're born is we take a breath in, we inhale. And the last thing we do before we die is we blow out or we exhale, right? And like everything in between those two breaths is our lives. And so my goal is to try to help people maximize their lives, maximize their comfort and their health and their well-being, and to live their best lives possible for all that time in between that first breath in and that last breath out.
That was so inspirational.
Thank you.
Did you always
want to saying that? Are you just saying that?
No, I'm not just saying that.
But what's funny? You said it's inspirational, right? Which breathing in is inspiration. That's what it's called.
Oh, I didn't even mean it like that.
This is perfect. That was awesome. So,
did you always want to go into pulmonary rehab?
Nope. I'll tell you a funny story. So why did I go into pulmonary rehab? I know I'm going to inspire all the troublemakers watching this, but I'll tell you how. I was working at NYU, and I'm not going to mention anybody's names, but I was working for somebody that was really difficult to work for, very unpleasant. And I mean, like, grown-ups would cry at work on a regular basis. And if I had a day off, I couldn't enjoy it because I was always worried what's going to happen when I go back to work the next day. And I went to the bosses. There was a guy named Ray Rodriguez. And I said, Ray, you got 2 weeks to get me off this service or I'm leaving the medical center. And he said, what about cardiopulmonary rehab? I said, I don't know anything about it, but I'll do it. And it just so happens that I went to cardiopulmonary rehab and I loved the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system made perfect sense to me in a way that no other system of the body did. The pulmonary system, the respiratory system made perfect sense to me in a way that no other system of the body did. It just felt good. And you got to really see people get better in a way that they sometimes don't with other conditions. And it turned out that I was better at that than anything else that I had done. And I'm not going to say I was better than anybody else, and the thing is that I just loved it and it just made sense. And the funniest thing is that, when I was working for that person I didn't like, I was always in trouble. I was always getting spoken to about something I was doing wrong. And it was very stressful. But what's very interesting is that shortly after I joined cardiopulmonary rehab, the chief resigned. And what I was hoping was that they would do a national search and bring in like a real powerhouse, somebody with a ton of experience that could now mentor me in my newfound love, profession, and specialty. And in fact, when I saw the people that were applying for the job, I was like, wow, I hope it's not one of them. And one of the bosses came to me and said, you know what, you should apply for the job. And I was like, apply for the job? I'm so new. I was only 24 at the time. And they were like, listen, trust me, just apply for the job. And miraculously, I got the job at the age of 24. And if this were like if this were like today and they were texting, like everybody in the medical center would have been like, it would have been like, holy cow. And people were like, this guy got the job. And I was like, that's right. I told you guys. But that being said, I knew I was still a little bit underprepared for the position. So I was happy to have it, but I was underprepared. And so I said to myself, I said, this is really an important position and it's an opportunity for me to really make an impact and prove myself. And so what I did was every single month on my own money and my own time, I went to another medical center that was known as one of the top pulmonary rehabilitation programs in the world and the country. So I went to the Duke University. I went to the University of California, San Francisco, University of California, San Diego, University of Florida. And I just went and tried to soak up every single thing that everybody was doing. And what I did was I tried to, come back to NYU and say, look, this is what they're doing at Duke. We could do this here. Or this is what they're doing in Florida. We could do this here. And they said, well, this is what they're doing in California. We could do this here. Except that when you work for a big organization, sometimes things move very, very, very slowly. And eventually my mentor, who was a beautiful human being, probably he still is, but he's retired. His name was Horatio Pineda, Dr. Pineda, who was not just a wonderful physician, but a very kind human being and a very smart man. And he encouraged me to do, anything and everything that I wanted to do. And when he retired, I decided that it was my time to leave the medical center and open my own practice where I could implement some of these things that I'd learned in other places.
Well, it's always nice to have people who believe in you.
Absolutely. And it's important, it's important to have somebody, because we don't all have that, right? Not all of us grow up with that. Or we grow up, with people telling us, there's a lot of people who will tell you what you can't do, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, it's like there's very few words that inspire me more than you can't do it. When someone says to me, you can't do it or it can't be done, that's my signal. I'm going to work. I'm going to make sure that gets done. But the other thing about that is that it's not only important to have people above you pushing you. It's important that you also look down the ladder to see who you can help also bring up as well. You know what I mean? It's like a cycle. It's like a chain. You reach up, someone helps you climb to the next rung. You reach down, you help the next person develop their skills and rise up as well.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of looking at it.
Thank you.
What does someone in the field of pulmonary rehab do daily?
So what we do, again, mostly we see patients who come in and they start off short of breath, or some of the cardiac patients may have chest pain. And if you think about it, like it's when it comes to breathing and how your body uses oxygen, it's really based on supply and demand, right? So the more activity you do, the greater the demand and the greater the supply of oxygen that you need. And how your body uses oxygen is really based on three main things. Number one, how good are your lungs at moving air in and out? Number two, how good is your heart at pumping blood? And number three, how good are your muscles at using oxygen, right? And typically when people start to get short of breath, it's going to happen at high levels of activity. So things like stair climbing, right? Because that's a lot of demand. So if your heart or your lungs are affected and they can't supply enough oxygen, that's going to lead to things like shortness of breath and or chest pain. Another thing people say is walking uphill, right? Because walking uphill is much more difficult than walking on a flat surface. And then the other thing is like walking fast. So the thing is that, in New York City, the things I hear most are walking up a flight of subway stairs, walking uphill, running for the bus. That's what I call the New York City pulmonary triathlon. And the thing is that your body gets good at doing what you ask it to do, right? So as people start to get short of breath, when they climb up the stairs, they find ways to avoid the stairs, right? Or if people get short of breath when they walk up a hill, they find ways to avoid walking up the hill. Like they look for blocks that are flat. And the problem with that is that the body gets good at doing what you ask it to do, and it gets bad at doing what you don't ask it to do. So if you don't ask it to walk up the stairs, well, then you get short of breath. Your muscles decondition, your body doesn't use oxygen as well, and then you start to get short of breath at lower levels of activity. And then you avoid those, and then you get more short of breath because you decondition. So in a nutshell, and I know it's a big nutshell already, but if I had to summarize it in like one sentence, what we try to do is we try to break into that cycle of shortness of breath and inactivity by teaching people more effective breathing techniques and then exercising them aerobically and under monitored conditions so that their bodies get better at using oxygen and they get less short of breath. So while people exercise, we have them hooked up to an EKG so we can watch their heart. We're checking their oxygen. We're checking their blood pressure. And that's essentially what we do all day.
Well, that seems like a lot. When did you decide to become a pulmonary rehab specialist?
It really started about that same time that I became the chief, when I was 24, because I learned about this system that really is not usually taught very well in physical therapy school because not that many people do it. So you get kind of a vague idea as to what cardiopulmonary physical therapy is. You don't really know because you were taught in a way that it was just very vague, at least in my experience. And I hear that from a lot of other people. But as I got to learn more and more and more about this, it just really, I knew it was like I had found what I'm supposed to be doing with my life.
That's really nice. How did you start your company and what is its specialty?
So I started my company by essentially getting a very small space and replicating a lot of the things that I had been doing for years at NYU. So all the things that I had learned through experience and also from traveling to these various rehabilitation centers, by that point in my mind, I had the perfect center set up. I had the perfect idea for a center. And like I said, it was, when you work for a big organization, it's very difficult often to get things done because there's a lot of people you have to go through. There's administration, there's budget and things like that. And what I did was I just kind of let people know that I'm planning to leave the medical center and open my own space. And I initially started with 2 small rooms. And it turned out that a lot of the patients followed me. And a lot of, the top therapists followed me, and also a lot of the doctors followed me. So, it was really, it was the right thing to do at the right time.
Yeah, it's really nice to have people behind you.
Definitely.
Have you gotten the chance to travel for your work?
I have. As a matter of fact, so I mentioned the places that I went when I was in my very early career. But one of the things that I love doing is every year there's a conference called it's the annual conference of the European Respiratory Society. And what I did was I made it a point to take my staff every year to the conference. And so we've been to Paris together. We've been to Madrid together. And we've traveled to many, many places all over the US. Number one, to learn, from continuing education courses and from conferences, but also to present our own research findings and to do our own lectures as well.
That sounds like an amazing experience.
It's really fun, and it's really a great opportunity to get to know people on a different level, and to just, it's fascinating to see what people around the world are doing, and it's like that's that ride at Disney World. It's a small world, and it's like, you see people from all different countries all over the world who are basically doing very, very similar things to you and who all have the same kind of career goals and life goals and mission in helping people breathe better. And it's just one of the best experiences, and it's also good to kind of get out of the office and spend time with your team in a way that's not just, work, but it's cultural and it's fun and it's exciting, and it just enriches you as a human being. It's one of the things I miss most about this global pandemic.
Yeah, that was a really interesting analogy you made.
Thank you.
Did you do any internships or jobs in different fields?
It depends how far you want to go back. I mean, I've worked in car washes. I've worked in delis. I was a newspaper boy with my Doberman pinch. I've had a lot of odd jobs. I had to do a few internships for, to become a physical therapist. But also I volunteer as an EMT for several years. And, that helped a lot in terms of managing emergencies and things of that nature. But when you get into a job that really requires you to do something and not just talk about something, there's no better experience than on-the-job learning, and that's kind of how you get the most experience and the most capability.
Did your odd jobs give you any important life lessons?
Oh man. Yeah, I think the thing is you have to kind of try to be respectful of people. I think, that includes not just adults, but kids. Like when I was a kid, I'll tell you a funny story. I was working at Wallbaum's. I don't know if Wallbaum's exists anymore, but it was this massive grocery store, right? And I was a stock boy. And I had a boss who was like really, I have a knack for finding the right bosses, but this guy was like the kind of guy who'd like scream at you. And, he's a grown up. And like when you're a kid and you have a grown up screaming in your face, it's like, wow, this is intense. So this guy wanted me to stack these 64-ounce jars of apple juice, right? And I'm stacking these jars of apple juice and they don't quite fit together right. So it's almost like you really have to, it's like a balancing act. And the guy's like, you got to stack them higher. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. They don't stay, like it's too high. He's like, listen, I want 4 more rows. So I'm like, all right, I'm stacking. I'm up on this huge ladder. Then one of my friend's moms comes in and starts talking to me. And she's like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, hey, Jane, how you doing? Next thing you know, just like I said, like maybe at least 30 jars of apple juice fall down. And now there's like a super cleanup in aisle 10. And the manager comes back and he's screaming at me. And he's like, you. And I was like, but I told you it's too high. Screaming at me. He's like, get in the back, get a mop, make sure you get the stuff. And I was just like, you know what? That's a wrap. And I took off my apron and I threw it to the guy. And I was like, I'm out of here. That's the end of my job. And I think what I learned is, you got to work hard, and no matter what you do, meaning like there's no job that's too big or too small. So like if you are a janitor, be the best janitor you could be. If you're somebody who works as a stock boy, be the best stock boy you could be. If you work as somebody who washes the hair at a salon or whatever it is, be the best at that you could be. Make people feel special and make their experience something that they're going to remember and want to replicate and want to repeat. And that's how you get people to come back over and over again. And we know we're supposed to work hard, right? But when you look at different people, famous people, actors, actresses, politicians, business people, a lot of them came from very humble beginnings where they were mopping floors or they were doing things that a lot of people may look down on. And I would say, try to just do the best you can, be humble, because you never know when that person you're looking down on is going to be your boss.
I feel like a lot of people could really use that.
Yeah, it's not an easy lesson to learn, especially in today's times where it's like, everybody's like, me, look at 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 me. And it's like, sometimes you never know, like, you never know what somebody's going through, you don't know what it's um, like, you just don't know. You don't know someone's situation. And so before you judge it and kind of assume, just give them the benefit of the doubt and think that, like I'll give you an example. Like one time I was like, I'm a bit of a wise guy. Like I am, I tell a lot of jokes and, sometimes I'm a little sarcastic or a lot sarcastic. And one time I was walking, one of my pet peeves is like when you hold the door for somebody and they don't say thank you, right? So I was coming out of this pet store on 34th Street and my dad was with me and I was holding the door for this lady for like, when I say a long time, I mean, maybe it was like 30 seconds, right? But we're like, oh, we're in such a rush for everything. And she comes out, she's taking a sweet time and comes out and doesn't say thank you, right? So me, I was young in my early 20s, still, very young and wild and not always on the most diplomatic. And I said to her, I went, "You're welcome," like sarcastically. And the woman said to me, she said, "I'm so sorry. My cat just died today. I'm not my son." And I immediately I felt like such an idiot, but that's something that stuck with me. And it's like when I see something, not that it doesn't bother me, like there are things that still get under my skin, but I try as best as I can to think like, what might this person be going through that could explain what might otherwise be considered bad behavior. And, I hope that sometimes, people will also give me that benefit of the doubt when I'm not at my best.
Yeah, I really like that way of thinking.
Thank you.
What do you like about your profession?
I love almost everything about it. I love being able to be there for somebody in their time of need. I love to be there for somebody to help them with something that is probably the single most important thing we do, which is breathing. And I love being able to give people their lives back, especially when, I told you before that my motivating words are, "It can't be done." So a lot of times patients are sent to me when nothing else has worked. And, I always say like what people consider the end of the line, I consider the starting line. Because, sometimes people will look at your age and say, "Oh, this person's too old for this." So they say, "Oh, you're sick. Oh, this person's too sick for this." They say, "Oh, this person's never going to get better." And you know what? We only live once as long as we know. And my goal is always going to be to give you the best shot at living your best life until your last breath. And, I love my job. There's only one thing I don't like about it, which is dealing with insurance companies and the finances of it, because that's just something that's a whole messed up system. But I love every aspect of working with patients and what I do. And I love that what I do works and my team is great and we get great results. So there's nothing more gratifying than seeing somebody who's able to get their lives back, to attend their grandchild's graduation, to get back on the golf course, to go back to work, to, anything. So for me, it's a dream come true. I didn't even know I had the dream, but it's like it's turned out, like I said before, when I first heard about it, when my dad gave me that article, I didn't really know anything about it, but it's literally gotten better and better and better and better. And my career has been like really 50 times better than I ever could have expected it to. And, in the last year and a half, it's changed quite a bit because, when COVID hit New York City, we closed the center on March 10th, 2020, because our patients were too sick to come out. So we didn't want to put our patients at risk by asking them to come and get on the bus or take a taxi or this, that. So we closed the center and, I went to work treating COVID patients. And on October 1st, we opened the COVID Rehab Center in New York City. And again, it's like another example of being in the right place at the right time to be able to help people during a global pandemic. So it's not like I was stuck at home for part of it, but, once we figured out what was going on, my team and our skills, turned out to be very valuable and needed by the world. And it's allowed us to really, again, be there to kind of plug a hole and help people during, one of the darkest times in our history.
Yeah, that seems like an amazing opportunity.
Thank you.
What, in your opinion, is so special and important about pulmonary rehab?
I mean, again, it's breathing. Like, it doesn't get more basic than the breath.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, it's, if you can't breathe, nothing else matters. So it's really, it's like the key to life. It's the literal key to life. It doesn't get more basic than that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I noticed that you have some clinical research experience. How did you get involved with this? And do you have any pieces of advice on how someone could get this opportunity?
Yeah, so up until very recently, I had been involved in some pretty low-level research. And when I say low-level research, what I mean is that there's different levels of research, right? So some of it could be like what we call a retrospective. That's Monkey. That's your dog and my dog, I think. Monkey, it's not your turn yet. So like, as an example of a lower level of research would be a retrospective study. Let's say where I look back at patients' charts and look at different areas of data or pieces of data, and I write a paper based on that. The higher levels of research would be what we call randomized studies or controlled studies, where you have somebody who's getting the treatment and then you have somebody who's not getting the treatment to compare, to make sure that what's making the change is really the treatment. So for example, we are doing a study right now on the effects of treadmill exercise and or oxygen therapy on COVID patients. So we randomize the patients, which means that we randomly assign them to different groups, and one group gets treadmill and oxygen, one group gets treadmill and no oxygen, one group gets oxygen and no treadmill, and one group gets no oxygen, no treadmill. And I have to admit that I wouldn't have been able to do this research myself because I don't have the background or the experience or the knowledge in research, but we partnered with somebody named Julie Messenger at the University of Dayton, who is a researcher by trade. And incidentally, she was a long hauler. She was a COVID patient who became our patient. And then we decided to collaborate on the research. And that has been really a great gift because it's allowed us to elevate our level of research to something that is a much higher level than any of our own experience alone. So what advice do I have to give? I don't really know. I'm not a professional I'm not somebody who's an expert on research. I would say, research everything. Be curious. Take classes in school that'll push you that way. So there's things like statistics or research design, like how you design a study is very, very important. But I'm not the single best person to talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. What are some challenges you faced in your job?
So one of the biggest challenges, again, I mentioned before, the only thing I hate is insurance, dealing with insurance. So, especially when you deal with government insurance, I don't want to say anything that's going to get me like arrested or anything like that. But, you have to deal with like government audits or insurance company audits where they'll come in and they'll be like, hey, we paid you for these 500 visits. And we're going to come in and review your charts to make sure that we paid for the right thing. And if you didn't do the right thing, we're going to take that money back. And that's something that's just constantly happening in healthcare, or fighting insurance companies like denials and things like that. So, we've had a number of government audits that thankfully we've always come out on the right side of. But it's super challenging, when you're being audited or, challenged by professional organizations or government organizations, it's almost like being on trial, and it's very, very stressful. And it's like you wake up every morning, you're like, oh God, please get me out of this. I mean, that's been a huge challenge. We've had some other challenges. I've had personal challenges in that, we lost one of our physical therapists who was a fireman during 9/11. I lost my brother recently, a couple of years ago. And, there's a lot of things that, come up in life. Life is it's beautiful, but it's got challenges with it. And so, you have to just keep trying to stand up and keep moving forward. There's a great Chinese saying that says, get knocked down 7 times, stand up 8. It's either get knocked down 7 times, stand up 8, or get knocked down 6 times, get up 7. The point is keep getting up, because as things can turn for the worse, things can also turn for the better as well.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. And that also sounds really difficult, all that you've been through.
Yeah, it's been challenging.
Among the people you've worked with or worked for, who do you admire and why?
So there's a lot. One is, as I mentioned before, Dr. Horatio Pineda, who was one of my mentors. He was a rehabilitation doctor and a super kind man. You could be super smart and great at what you do, but if you lack that empathy and that human connection, then a lot of what you do is lost. I had another mentor named Mariano Ray, who was a cardiologist. Also really pushed me. These were the guys that, got me the job as the chief when the time came and when I was too early and too young and too inexperienced for the job. But they took a chance on me and gave me my shot. I also worked with a guy named Larry Virgilio, who was a fireman. As I mentioned, he was a fireman and also a physical therapist in our practice. Also super strong physically, emotionally, but also very sensitive. And again, unfortunately, he died in the World Trade Center. And also one of my colleagues named Marion Mackless, who I've been working with since 1994, which is like hard to believe. You probably weren't even alive in 1994. But to think that I've been working with somebody for so long is just like mind blowing. I've been very fortunate in that, I've worked with some great people. I've worked for some great people. I've worked for some not so great people, but I've also had a lot of great people working with me and for me. And, as they say, teamwork makes the dream work. So.
Yeah, it's always nice to be around people like that. If I'm a middle or high school student interested in pursuing pulmonary rehab, what advice would you give me to get started?
So middle or high school student, doesn't matter. Okay, I started what I did in high school. I would say find out where there's a pulmonary rehab practice near you, or where there's a pulmonary rehab program near you, or where there's a physical therapy practice near you, or even a hospital near you. And, say, hey, I'd like to volunteer here. And there's a lot of practices and places that will take you in as a volunteer and allow you to get a bird's eye view of everything that goes on, so that you can get an experience of it, that you could see how it feels, see how it looks, see if it's right for you, right? Because we all have, ideas of what things are. Like we all have this idea, oh, that job, I know what it's like, right? But sometimes you don't know until you're actually doing it. But I would say volunteer, get as much experience as you can, read, subscribe to magazines, or again, if you know somebody who does it, then by all means try to volunteer. The other thing is with the internet, when I went to school, I didn't even have a computer or a cell phone, right? I know that sounds abominable today to imagine. But the thing is that with the internet, all you have to do is type something in and a million things come up. So if you want to know about pulmonary rehabilitation, type in pulmonary rehabilitation, and thousands of videos, stories, articles will come up. So I would say learn as much as you can, try to really determine if it's for you. And if you have the opportunity, volunteer your time, helping out in a place like that. Because one thing that's also very valuable about that, it's not like you're going and trying to learn the profession per se. You still have to go to school, of course, but just the ability to interact with patients, and to come in contact with people that you might never have the ability or the opportunity to come in contact with is so valuable. I can't tell you how much I've learned from my patients and how many fascinating stories there are, especially, when you talk about older patients, like I've had patients who were in World War II, I've had patients who were in Vietnam, in Korea, I've had patients who, were famous musicians or actors or politicians, and unfortunately, due to patient privacy, I can't name any of them. Otherwise, the ratings for this show would go through the roof once you heard who I've taken care of in my time. But it's like, really being able to hear people who are different from you tell their story gives you a great deal of perspective, and it puts things in a framework that you might not have thought of otherwise.
That sounds really cool to be a part of.
Thank you.
Additionally, what advice would you give me to be successful?
Never stop working. And I don't mean be a workaholic. I mean, if you want to be great at something, you have to push at it, and you have to work at it, and you have to make your mind up that nothing is going to stop you from being great at what you do. If you want to just do a job, collect a check, come home at the end of the day, drink a beer, watch TV, not you're too young for that beer, but there's nothing wrong with that, right? But if you really want to be great at what you do, and to me, I feel like if something is worth doing, it's worth being the best at. So like, I'm not going to be like on the golf course playing around if I'm not that good at it, which I'm not. So like, I'm not going to spend my time that way. Like, I'm going to spend my time working and driving and dreaming and pushing to be the best at what I can be. And I'm gonna think about my dream and work towards it, and around the clock, and study and read and try to make myself the best I could be at every level. One person, you asked me who's inspiring, in my career that I've met. One person that I've never met but that I find super inspiring is Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant is like, if you listen to him and you watch him on TikTok, like every chance I get, I'm watching. I mean, it sounds stupid. I'm, like, here I am, 51 years old, watching TikTok, right? But you learn a lot on TikTok, believe it or not. There's a lot of stupid things on TikTok too. But like, when you listen to Kobe Bryant talk, like or Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, these guys, every single aspect of what they do is to make them the best at what they do. So they get to the gym first, they leave the gym last, they do an extra workout for the day, they push. So when it's time to perform, they've already done that over and over and over again. And what I do is, I practice. I'm constantly reviewing things in my head. I'm constantly reviewing protocols. I'm constantly going over statistics or physiology, or I'll be just doing something. Let's see if I because sometimes you can only remember something if you're in the right situation. So I try to prepare myself for as many situations as possible. So I might be walking down the street and I'll say to myself, oh, let me see if I remember that protocol. And I'll start repeating it in my head, and I'll say BSI, scene safety, MOI, NOI, number of patient needs for, and then I'll just go, so that when something comes up or an emergency occurs or I need to remember something, it's second nature to me, because I've been over it in my head a billion times, and I've practiced it, and I've seen it, and I've tried to expose myself to it in as many ways possible. The reason why I became a volunteer emergency medical technician is because I wanted the experience of emergencies, practicing emergencies over and over and over again, so that if it ever happened in my clinic, or if it ever happened in my life, or if it ever happened on the street, I don't have to think twice. I know what to do, and I'm prepared. And, I want to be that guy. It's like Kobe says, I want the ball every time. I want to take the last shot. If something goes wrong, I want to be the person who helps make it better.
That sounds like really great advice that I hope I would follow in the future. What is your advice to parents of students who want to pursue going into clinical trials?
So when you say clinical trials, do you mean who want to conduct clinical trials?
Or like pulmonary rehab and... Yeah.
So again, I would say number one, encourage. Okay. Number two, support. Even if it's not for you, right? Like, even if the sight of blood makes you queasy, but your child wants to do this, support their dreams, encourage their dreams, nurture their dreams. Don't discourage them. right? I'm very lucky in the sense that my parents, not that they never tried to tell me what to do, they tried to tell me what to do in certain ways, but they also encouraged me in whatever I wanted to do. So I wanted to be a physical therapist. They supported me 100%. Okay. I am also an artist. I wanted to go into the art world. They supported me 100%. Anything I do, my parents have always been willing to support me. And that goes for my brother and my sisters too. They pushed us and they wanted us to succeed, and they wanted us, to accomplish our dreams. So I would say to parents, number one, be careful with your words. Don't discourage, right? Because you never know what word. I'll give you an example, and I'm just making this up, but it's not impossible that somebody would say, you know what, you're not smart enough to become a doctor, right? I mean, it sounds mean, but it's not like people don't say things like that, right? So you never know how, when your child is going to take a shot at something or think, you know what, I'd like to take this biology course, or I'd like to take this chemistry course, or I'd like to do this. In the back of their mind, they may hear your words saying, you know what, you're not smart enough. You're not smart enough. You're not smart enough. And it gets ingrained into your head. And it's like, if you say, you know what, you are smart enough. You can do whatever you want. Now, when I say you can do whatever you want, I mean, I'm 5'6". So the idea is, no matter how much I practice, I'm not going to go to the NBA, right? But you want to give your children the opportunity to succeed, and also the opportunity to learn on their own and experience on their own, even if you don't always agree with their choices.
Yeah, I find that to be really helpful to certain parents if they're watching this. If you had
Are you giving anyone any hints right now? Like your parents?
Yeah. If you had any advice you could give to your past self, and if you could do something differently, what would it be?
If I could do something differently, I would say, I mean, we all look back at a certain point and say, oh, I wish I would have handled this situation better. So I can think of a lot of little things and medium things and big things. But I think as I look back, like when I was in my early 20s, I was working my butt off and I was seeing a ton of private patients. And so as a result, I was making really good money. And I was also spending really good money. And if I look back on it, if I were smarter back then, and if I had some more forethought on the matter, what I would have done is I would have started investing in real estate. Because at that time in New York City, which was like the early 90s, you could really, you could get property for not that expensive. And, I've watched people do it since. I've never been a very good money manager, but I watch people who will buy a studio apartment, then they convert it to a 1-bedroom and they sell it for more money. And then they buy a 1-bedroom and they convert it to a 2-bedroom and they sell it for more money. So if I would say one thing, I would have tried to invest more smartly when I was younger, but I put my investments in myself in my own business. So in that respect, I really don't have any regrets, because look, we make mistakes. We're human. We do things. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. There's a song by I think it's by Rihanna and Paul McCartney of the Beatles and Kanye West, and it says, you're not perfect, but you're not your mistakes. And so if we just backtrack a little bit also to advice I'd give to parents, it's let your children be imperfect, right? Let them make mistakes, because that's how we learn, right? That's how we learn. Nobody's perfect. If we always expect perfection, we'll always be let down. And there's a saying, and I can't think of who said it, but it's like, don't let perfect interfere with great, right? So it's like some people, unless it's perfect, we don't want it. But it's like, let people learn through experience, make their own mistakes. Sometimes it's not very satisfying for somebody to say to you, hey, you're not going to like that ice cream, right? You want to know for yourself. You want to know if you like that flavor. And it's the same thing with life experiences. So it's okay to learn. It's okay to not do well. It's okay to fail. It's okay to fall down. It's okay to get hurt. And, these things are not usually permanent. They're not permanent defects, right? They're things that we can overcome. And there's a saying that says, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And it's like, as long as we can learn from it and avoid the same mistake over and over again, we get better and we get stronger. And the more experiences we have, the more things we're equipped to deal with.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people expect perfection, but then are let down.
Yeah, and that goes for ourselves and in other people too, and again, like I said before, you don't know what somebody else is going through, but I'll tell you a joke. My mom it's a funny story about my mom, but like, it used to be like, if I would come home with a 97 on a test, like, I think she was half joking and half serious, but she'd say like, what happened to the other 3 points, right? And you'd be like, I got a 97. What isn't that good enough? And sometimes it's like, you need to be told that you're okay. You're not perfect, but you're okay. And you're acceptable, and you're perfect for you're perfectly imperfect, because none of us are perfect, right? We all have our flaws. We all have our imperfections. We all make mistakes. And, it's like they say, forgive my trespasses as I would forgive others who trespass against me, or I want to forgive others, for their trespasses on me. But it's like, don't expect perfection. Life is not made up of perfection. Life is those kind of middle kind of ups and downs. If it was perfect all the time, it wouldn't be very interesting. It would be boring. And I will just add one more thing that you just reminded me of. There's one thing to like, it's one thing to say like, be the best you can be, but not everybody can be the best, right? I mean, it's like, one thing is like in let's say kids soccer today, right? If there's 10 teams, everybody gets a trophy, right? Even if the 10th place team, they get a trophy, and they're called 9th runner up. Being the best is important, but it's even more important to be yourself and to really understand who you are and what's important to you, and to make sure that you're just trying to really be the best version of yourself. You're not competing with anybody else. And this is good advice, even though I don't always follow it myself. I'm competitive by nature, so I want to be the best. But one of I'd say the value in humans that I really value the most and respect the most is authenticity. So it's like, say what you mean, and act on what you say. So it's like, talk the talk, but also make sure you walk the walk, and make sure your word is good. And that if you say something, you mean it, and you're going to follow through on it. And, be yourself and be the best version of you that you can be, because, it's like they say, there's a saying, it says something like, be the best version of you, or be yourself, because everybody else is taken, right? So you might as well just figure out who you are and what's important to you. And, one of my favorite children's authors, Dr. Seuss, says, be yourself, because the people that mind don't matter. And be yourself, because the people that matter don't mind, and the people that mind don't matter. So it's like, the people who you love and who love you, and who will, they will accept you for who you are and what you want to be. And if somebody is unaccepting of that, or it's not good enough for somebody, then that's not the people you want to surround yourself with anyway. So, be yourself, be your authentic self, be true to yourself and those around you.
Yeah, I feel like that's really good advice as well.
Thank you.
What goals do you have for the future?
Goals for the future. So I want to get in better physical shape myself. I want to get in better mental shape myself. I would love to open a new rehabilitation center. And I would love to, I don't know, maybe write another book.
Another book? Does that mean?
I did write a book called Ultimate Pulmonary Wellness. which is all about living well with pulmonary disease. But I'd say if I had to make one dream right now, I'd love to open a big pulmonary rehabilitation center on the Upper East Side of Manhattan in New York City.
Thank you, Dr. Noah Greenspan, for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. This was really fun and really interesting. And yeah, I hope that somebody will be helped by what I said tonight.
I hope so too. And thank you to our viewers. Be sure to check out all our other episodes and subscribe to our channel, and stay up to date with all our meetings and activities by following us on social media and signing up for our email list. Check the description for all the links, and see you next time.